Welcome back to the Global Business Report on Arise News. Food prices continue to increase, of course, in Nigeria. National Bureau of Statistics selected food price watch for December 2021 revealed that higher prices were recorded on a month-on-month basis and year-on-year for all selected food reporting, except for broken rice ofada and Gari rice white sold loose, whose prices declined month-on-month by 0.09% and 0.92% respectively. However, yam tubers, white maize, brown maize, mudfish, white beans, unripe plantains all saw the highest year-on-year gains, ranging from 59% all the way to about 35%. Joining us to discuss the agricultural sector is Chuka Mordi. He's the CEO of one of the players in the agri space, Ellah Lakes. Chuka, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
What needs to be done to reduce the cost of what we're seeing for food prices? Is it more production?
Well, more production obviously helps greatly. More efficient production helps greatly also. But in terms of reducing food prices, it's not necessarily the problem that in prices. You want to have a macro environment where people have enough money to actually buy food, and food is affordable. So the price is not necessarily the problem. But also, the insecurity issues that led discussed in several areas, and that's what leads to food inflation, supply-demand imbalance.
You had, I think it's about 3 weeks ago, now speaking of food production, a collaboration with the Enugu state government on rice. And of course, we saw the Central Bank of Nigeria, this president in Abuja, the rice pyramids that unveiled there. So rice is a big topic here in the country.
Yes.
What's this collaboration about with Enugu State with you?
That was very interesting. It's Ellah Lakes and Ada Rice Production Company in Enugu State. So what the plan is to do is to diversify across a variety of sectors on a large space. So we're on 5,000 hectares, expanded to 10,000 hectares. So Ada Rice is already producing rice. Going forward, we're producing maize and soya for a feed mill. And then we're producing cassava to process into industrial starch. So it's all about having a staple crop processing zone in one specific area and going along the entire value chain for everything that we are trying to produce.
Is that a model to follow for other food commodities, whereby you've got the private sector partnering with the different states, together? Is that a model to follow?
I think it's a great model, yes, but it's not necessarily the only model I would say that can be efficient and optimal. There's Dangote, there's Bua, Presco, Komu, but they're all doing these by themselves. And I think a partnership with the state can be very helpful, but not necessarily the case. But it's a useful way to go forward.
You're also into, I believe, oil palm production. I understand that I think for the length of time it takes to produce food is 30 months?
30 to 36 months for it to start fruiting optimally.
That's a long time. What's the upside? I know the other players in this, but what's the upside for oil palm?
Upside is, mainly the supply-demand imbalance. If we doubled our production in Nigeria, we would still need to produce because there's a lot of growth in demand. We consume a lot of oil palm. And then we consume palm oil, which is a derivative. And then we consume a lot of the other derivatives, oleins, stearians. So there's a lot of growth in the sector. But of course, because it takes a long time to get to where we want to get to, we're diversifying across a variety of other food crops. So we're not dependent on just oil palm. So as a risk mitigating factor, we're now in cassava. We're moving to maize and soya. And a variety of crops that make sure we're not just dependent on one particular crop.
I'm glad you mentioned, it's almost like portfolio investing where you want to, make sure that you're diversifying to mitigate risk. Cassava, you mentioned cassava.
Yes.
There's a lot that's been said about Nigeria's potentials, as far as cassava production and exports is concerned. What's holding us back there on the cassava side?
A variety of things. One is the nature of the inputs, which are suboptimal for a lot of farmers. Fertilizer costs, herbicide costs, and your average, farmer cannot afford these things. That's one. So what that does is lead to reduced yield. Outside Nigeria, you're probably doing averages of up to 20 tons per hectare in terms of yield for cassava. But with the lack of more sophisticated inputs, modern practices in terms of agronomy are not that efficient, so that's what's leading to yields being suboptimal.
What do you hope to change with you going into cassava then? With these kind of challenges, what's the upside for you?
Well, I mean, modern agricultural practices, modern agronomy. We have agronomists who I think take a more sophisticated, modern approach to it. And what we want to do essentially is not just do cassava for consumption, is to move up the value chain and go into industrial starch, go into ethanol, which is a significant amount of these we're still importing into Nigeria. So Nigeria is the largest producer of cassava on the planet,
Yeah.
but our yields are fairly low per hectare.
Right.
And so we still import derivatives of cassava, such as industrial starch, such as ethanol. So there's an entire value chain there that we think we can exploit.
Gotcha. Now, speaking of yield per hectare, I know you're not into yams, but I do have to...
No, we're not into yams.
There's got three charts here from Stairs, which is
Yes.
a think tank. Nigeria producing 6 times more yams than Ghana. So I think you've got Ghana in the dark red, Nigeria in the I guess burgundy or lighter red color there. Then the second chart, as far as the land area, you can see Nigeria in green, Ghana in yellow. I mean, 1/10 of the land that Nigeria uses for yam, planting and so on. But this third chart, what's the third chart here? I mean, look at this. This is yield or yam production yield per hectare, where Ghana, despite being 1/10 of the land that Nigeria uses, despite producing 6 times less yams, Ghana seems to be doing well. And I think you're doing business in Ghana, yes? Do you have any?
There's an Ellah Lakes Ghana PLC now.
Gotcha.
So we're about to start to get business in Ghana.
Is yield per hectare? You already mentioned that with cassava. Is that the number one metric when it comes to agric production? And how do we, this rivalry Ghana is from football, African Nations Cup is going on.
Yes.
So I think we're playing them in a World Cup qualifier, jollof rice and so on. Anyway,
Yeah.
so yam is in that area. What is yield per hectare? Is that the number one metric? Is that is that the be all and end all when it comes to increasing production?
I wouldn't say the be all and end all, but it's certainly one of the most important things to look at in production of any crop at all. So yield per hectare just shows the nature of efficiency in what you're doing. So yes, it's very, very important. There are a variety of other things to look at around your production, but
as far as farmers are concerned, there's a lot of emphasis on smallholder farmers. You've mentioned that already.
Yeah.
The Central Bank of Nigeria has the Anchor Borrowers Program,
Yes.
which has helped out. But how do we upgrade smallholder farmers? You've mentioned affordability in one of your other answers to my prior questions. How do we increase their wealth, increase how well they're doing for smallholder farmers? What do they need?
I think there are a variety of things. One is education, in order to understand what they're doing and doing it properly. So they need to be educated about farming practices, be educated about the nature of inputs and what makes their crop better. They need to be educated about the harvest periods, what they should do well. And so I think that's a crucial thing, education. Without question, helping them with the loans helps a great deal in trying to improve the efficiency of what they're doing. But I think on the equity side, it's more important to find some kind of equity that has a long-term financing for them rather than just year-on-year loans that can put pressure on their business models. But I think fundamentally education and finance.
Speaking of education, I want you to talk to us about the marriage between technology, mechanized farming, and output, and I guess how you get these farmers to be properly educated to use the machines, which can, I guess, improve outputs for agriculture.
I think there are many aspects you can look at that do not necessarily apply to small-scale farmers, but can, across the board, increase agricultural practices immensely. You can use satellite technology tied into machinery that does optimal spraying of your fertilizers. So if you're low in phosphates at one side of the field, you get a satellite mapping imagery that shows you what exactly is going on with the nature of your field. So if you apply that to a computer and you can understand how to efficiently, optimally spray your fields. You can use satellite imagery for topological graphs, so you understand the best way to drain your field, the best way to plant throughout the cycle, and the best things to plant on your field. So there are many ways you could do that. I think with small-scale farmers, can they afford these things? No. But if you go through a cooperative framework where you say, this is the charge, and we'll provide you with all this data, then it becomes more affordable, because from a scale perspective, a lot of people going together can pay for one product that they couldn't necessarily pay for if they were alone.
I really want to get your thoughts because you talked a lot about tech, and most
Yes.
of this tech is used for monitoring, how things are going.
Yes.
Climate change and the impact, floods, drought, all this impact on farmland. I know Ellah Lakes has its environmental sustainability goals. So how's that working out? What's your outlook on that?
In a general sense, yes, it's problematic. Our SDGs are tied into our CSR program, our corporate social responsibility. So there are a variety of them that we focus on because we can't try and be all things to all men. But yes, it's problematic in some ways. Climate change, especially in the north, desertification is not helping a great deal. But there are a variety of ways in which we're trying to fight this, proper irrigation down south, but the desertification is not helping greatly, and I think that's a problem. Going forward, I think there needs to be interaction between the government and the private sector to see what can be done from a policy perspective to deal with these issues.
Is enough being done in your view? I mean, there's been a lot of talk about, there's green bonds, there's all this, but is enough being done, or do you think more?
It's always possible to do more. And I think we could do a lot more to improve the situation. And like I said, it's a government, a policy, private sector collaboration issue.
Great stuff. Earlier, you touched on insecurity when you were talking about how to increase production.
Yes.
Have your operations been impacted by what we've seen, I guess, the whole insecurity and how that's impacted agri output?
To a large degree, yes, significantly so.
Yeah.
But what we're doing is try to engage. So we've engaged with some herdsmen in our vicinity that have caused problems for us. And I think it's probably unproductive to try and engage in any, we have security, but it's unproductive to try and engage in violence. So I think we've tried to engage in dialogue to see how we can accommodate them, but make them understand that you can't just keep on destroying our crops. So it's a combination of increasing the nature of our security and then engaging in dialogue from a community perspective to see how we can all accommodate these people.
I think it was the governor of Kaduna, El Rufai, was saying more drones should be used when it comes to insecurity. Is tech also, is there a play there to reduce insecurity?
A drone's more efficient, yes, but I mean, you have to implement the results of whatever you're doing. So drones don't arrest people.
Right.
Drones don't stop herdsmen and cattle. Drones can identify them, but I think once you've done that, the next step is what do you actually do in order to change the nature of the situation. I think some of these problems stem from, economic pressure. Grazing routes have disappeared. People have built houses. Urban areas have expanded significantly. So I don't think it's a very simple matter of, herdsmen wanted to destroy people's crops. But I think the economic pressure of certain things has pushed them into other areas, and we have to figure out how to manage that. As a private enterprise, it's possible to engage in dialogue, but I think from a major policy perspective, the problem can only be fixed if we get the government involved and have a serious conversation about how we fix these issues.
Good stuff. Land borders, smuggling of foods into the. How has that also impacted? And what's your take on what's been? I mean, the land borders were shut back in late 2019 into 2020. Have you addressing, or how do you view the border issues and how it's impacting your business?
Well, addressing one, we can't do anything about it except talk about it and hope that it gets fixed. But no, smuggling is still very significant. It's the borders are pretty porous. It's not helping. A lot of rice is smuggled into Nigeria. It doesn't really help pricing from our perspective, what's being smuggled. But I think the matter of smuggling is not a simple, straightforward matter. It's a combination of what the nature of the market is, what tariffs you have, and how the policy environment dictates pricing. Do we place tariffs on certain things? Yes or no? It's a issue that needs to be debated at length. But if you put tariffs on, you potentially encourage smuggling because there's a price gap that can be exploited.
Right.
So do you have an efficient customs service? Do you have porous borders? Those are discussions that are way outside my purview, but they all need to be addressed.
I got you. Less than a minute to go, about 45 seconds. Your outlook for this? It's a pre-election year. Outlook on the agri sector. How do you think things are going to work out 2022?
I mean, we're in the middle of raising equity financing. Essentially, we're just scaling up the business. I don't think elections will have any significant impact on our particular operations. But I think given how tough last year was, it's just going to be a lower base but significant increase.
Hey, great conversation. Chuka Mordi, CEO, Ellah Lakes PLC. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you very much for having us.